Sarah Pepper, KHMX in Houston. Watching the film last night, there's so much of the movie that you can't see in real time. There's so much of it that you're not going to be able to see with the effects afterwards. How do you, as a director, visualize all of that in that moment?
Oh, I see. Like the recording of it's complicated. I said to people that I think Avatar is probably the most complicated film you could make because most of the reality is invented, and then I'd say we're the shelf below that, where it's incredibly complicated because almost all of our reality is augmented. It was probably the single biggest challenge of the movie was the movie's shot in pieces. Mm-hmm. And most movies are shot in pieces, but those pieces are scenes. I mean the movie shot in pieces, where it's like these 4 setups are on Jennifer, and this setup over here is on Jennifer, except the wilderness hasn't been recorded yet. So we had a very, very detailed approach where we listed every element in different colors so we knew what was going to be recorded when and how. And really, it was like the single biggest challenge to keep straight in your head, because I had to think about this one little piece here of Casca flying inside of the storm, for example, and just do those 2 shots. And then I would shoot Jen months later and be like, okay, he's shooting at you, there's your eye line. And then I would give her things like to hold, to react so she could get inside of the scene. And so it was really challenging. The thing that I learned, and I probably wouldn't have been successful earlier in my career, was I took this approach, which was, I've got these 3 movie stars. I'm going to do everything in my power to simplify this for them. I'm going to take the technical as far out of the equation as possible, which sounds a little absurd because there's so much technical. But for example, when Jen's in the mech suit, instead of doing classic coverage where it's like, I'll do 2 shots here and then we'll do 2 shots here, I put 4 or 5 cameras on her in every scene, and then I just got out of the way. I didn't give her eye lines for Smith. We invented that in post. I let her perform freely as I could. And literally most of those scenes would be, 4 or 5 cameras set up, shoot the entire scene, we're done the scene.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Period. You're done. Yeah. And then she could walk away and I could shoot the inserts and the pieces. Yeah. But it was, again, my approach was, I want the best performances I can get. I've got these excellent actors. There's so much technical in this movie. I don't want them to be encumbered by what I have to think about. So my approach was to try to get out of the way for them.
You have to be really organized for that. That's what I'm taking away from it. But sci-fi is obviously your thing. Technology has changed so much. Making a movie 5 years ago looks completely different than probably what it is right now. Mm-hmm. How much of a benefit is that the technology is actually helping to make these movies? In
all honesty, I'm probably not the right person to ask the question, because here's the reason. I don't take the approach of, how do we pull this off? I take the approach of, here's what I'm imagining. Can somebody please tell me how to make this?
Okay, that's fair.
Well, because the thing about it is I'm hiring really world-class technicians, and I don't want to dictate to them how to do their job out of respect, but also we're all creatives, right? In this space, you're surrounding yourself with creatives. And my role as the creative in those environments, and almost all environments, is, the way I look at it anyway, is I'm here to make sure you succeed. I'm here to make sure you succeed and you succeed and you succeed. And the best way I can do that is to be supportive and open-minded and be very clear with, this is my goal.
Have you found it, though, to be easier, though, to work on?
Have I found that to be easier? I mean, yeah. Again, I don't necessarily care. No.
I know, you know what, you're letting it go. You're just let it flow.
I have to. Here's the thing, is when, first of all, I'm Canadian, okay? And so there's this part of me.
So you're really nice.
Well, yes. There's a part of me where it's I hate to ask them to do this. But in San Andreas, we were rolling cars, and they came over and they were like, well, this is the fastest we can roll a car. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, but we're going to have to roll it at least twice as fast. And they were like, oh, God. And they all looked at me, and I was like, I don't know what to tell you. Yeah. That doesn't look right. That's not gonna, no one's gonna like that. If I just say yes to that, it's not gonna work, and we're all gonna be later. You're gonna feel that way, I'm gonna feel that way, the audience is gonna feel that way. So again, my way of approaching is I'm gonna be supportive and open-minded to all the technicians and all the creatives, and I'm there to support them. But my approach is, how do we make this look as realistic or awesome or scary or whatever the emotion I'm trying to get, how do we pull that off? And I try to actually stay out of the technical conversation. And then once I see them start putting it together, oddly, because my approach is so direct, a lot of times what I think is going to be the answer, but I'd rather say, oh, great job, than sit there and dictate to somebody, do this.
Got it.
I just don't feel like that's a great environment. And I am like, in those environments, the coach, or a bit of the point guard and the coach, or the quarterback and the coach. Like, but it's like, you're trying to build camaraderie and, a tightness with your people. And it's like, no, let's get into it. So the part of not caring is really like, I'm not tech forward. I'm creative forward, and I support the technicians. Yeah.
I'm here for that delegation all day.
Honestly, otherwise the movie would never get made. If I sit there and like try to dictate how to do everything, it's not going to happen on time.
Well, first of all, creating a movie with a strong female lead, we stand. So thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love it. I mean, ever since Alien.
Right. So I had two questions now that we're going to do that one instead. How much of Ripley is in there in that moment when she's coming down the thing and she says, "Get away from her, you bitch." Sorry. And because when there were so many moments where she was so strong coming into her power in this movie. Yeah. But it's when I wrote down in my notes, I was like, it's Ripley.
Yeah.
Is part of that there for you that she sort of walked so that J-Lo could run?
That's her quote. Yeah. That's a very good quote. But it's such a I have such a long-winded, complex answer to this. But I mentioned I was Canadian. James Cameron's Canadian. Mm-hmm. When I was 13, I saw Terminator 2. Like, to put it in context of like my age and how his films affected me. And when I saw James Cameron as a kid, I was like, oh, wait, Canadians can go to Hollywood and do this? Like, it never crossed my mind. And he, I think, with Sarah Connor and with Ripley, he has such a strong approach to strong female leads. And I loved that. And I don't know if it's because my relationship with my mom is really strong, and she was a nurse, and she's very open-minded, she's very creative. Like in my house, my mom, all of our Christmas ornaments she built them all, she made them all.
Oh wow.
All the art in our house she crocheted, knitted, drew, whatever. It's all my mom's stuff in my house. So my environment was a very creative, but she would never she's so like Canadian. She would be like, no. Oh my God, beyond humble. Like it's great. Like she's, it's just what I do, like, and so I was surrounded with that. And then so I guess on some level, I've just always related to that. I also got along with Jen really well because Jen's really strong, kind of like a living legend. She's an icon. She has this place in the world where you're like, I don't quite understand it, but it's like, you are this thing, you're an entity, you're a powerful force. And I love that. And I loved working with her. And I think it's because we're both very direct and very supportive. And, I never looked at it as like, this is the continuation of Ripley, but I also am very aware that I loved those movies. And by the way, that's how the script got to me, because I would tell anybody who would listen, I really want to do a strong female lead movie, because my intuition told me I'll be very good at this. And a lot of it probably has to do with how I've directed mostly the male action stars I'd work with. I'm still like a softie. Like, I'm not like the bro, like I'm not that guy. I'm just not, I'm not. Like,
we hadn't noticed.
Yeah. I mean, like, if I have to talk to them like that, I can, but that's not my vibe whatsoever. I'm more like, how do you feel about like, what if we did like a thing with but then I get like sucked into the action. I'm like, this. So I think like I just related to that type of character, and I'd always wanted to do it. And so when Jen's name came up, I thought, okay, the skill set is there, the courage, which I think is the number one virtue you'd have to play her. Absolutely. To go inside a mech suit by yourself and perform by yourself for 7 or 8 weeks. she had all of that in spades. So it was like, yeah, it was super exciting.
Well, thanks for doing it.
Yeah, no, let's do it again.
So kind of talking about how she had to go in and do these things by herself, I was wondering, usually you're in there and you're talking to two people, like, hey, I need you to come in and do this, I need you to come in and do this. And essentially, you're talking to Jennifer and then a voice, right?
Yeah.
Like she's really not interacting with another person that she's actually looking at. So did you find challenges, pros and cons, or did you like it a lot more? Like what was the transfer there for you?
So it was completely new. I'd never shot anything like this. And so one of the things that I've said to people in the past, which is really true, is like as a creative, the worst sensation you can have, and I've had it, so I know, is that you're repeating yourself.
Yeah.
And so the reason that I came and tried to do a movie like this in the first place, because I thought the material was new and the approach would be new. So the difficulty was also the thing that was most exciting / scary. Because when you're there and there's 400 people and we got the mech suit 2 days before we put cameras on it.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Not a
so we
lot
had
of time.
tons of
time.
research time, you know? So I didn't let Jan or anyone know that, but I'm sitting there going, okay, how do we do this? Like literally, how do we physically do this? Mm-hmm. But in that, question, and also where I'm at in my career, where I've had enough experience on these big movies that I don't really maybe freak out like I would have, like when I started. I just sort of go, yeah, I can figure this out. Let's figure this out. And I let my intuition and excitement sort of take over. And what that allowed me to find was, okay, she's in this mech suit, but if I put and she's also, let me back up and say, Jen's superpower is her intuition. She's very intuitive. Mm-hmm. Most intuitive actor I've ever worked with.
Interesting.
And so what that means is with intuition, you have to let them be free. Because I know that because I'm intuitive.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I don't want someone to go, yeah, you can come and shoot anything, but not this side of the room. You're like, okay, well, that just turns half my brain off.
Right.
Like, I just don't know how to engage that.
And that's not shooting everything or anything because you took half of it away.
Yeah. So you're like, okay, well, what am I doing here? Like, how do I work with that?
Yeah.
So I got into this place where I'm like, okay, she's very intuitive and I don't want to take my process and get in the way of what she's doing. So instead, what I did was I pulled the DP aside and I said, I need to put 4 or 5 cameras on her at all times. We need to lock 4, so we had 2 handheld and then 2 locked on minimum on the ARC suit. Now, what that forced me to do, and trust me, I'm like a total design freak, neat freak, organized freak. I had these like layouts that I'd spent months doing where it's like these 2 cameras and then take those down and then these 2 cameras. I was like, all right, well, that's going in the trash. And I'm literally putting 5 cameras at once so that basically we could roll on the entire scene and we wouldn't have to do the scene twice.
And reshoot, yeah.
We would just get the scene.
That's awesome.
So it was like, go. Like, you are now free to perform. Now, I worked with her. She was very, very active in like, this sounds strange, but in her blocking, like, but she would say like, oh, my leg hurts. I want to put it up here. I'm like, oh, okay, I never imagined that, but that's cool. Let me like move the camera around. Like, there was a lot of trust and give and take between her and I when it came, more than anyone else. Like, generally speaking, a lot of actors will just let me say, okay, go there, go here. Like, she was like more, again, intuitive. Like,
feeling
she wanted
her
to
character.
feel it out. Exactly, she wanted to feel it out.
Yeah.
And so I never told her where the eye lines were for Smith, so she could look in it. When she was performing, she didn't know that he was going to be there like that. I just let her perform. I built the movie around her because I was like, this is the wisest thing for the best. It's why I think she's so good in the movie was A, she's so invested as a performer, and B, I didn't get in the way. I didn't make it a technically cumbersome thing. And it could have easily been that. I could have been 2 cameras here, roll, okay, we got those parts, let's go back to the top of the scene, 2 cameras here, all right, we got that part. And then you would have seen diminishing returns from this performer who's so intuitive, who just, think about her career. She shows up and she gives you everything she has in this live performance, and you get 100% of that, and then the curtain goes down and she's off. Yeah. So I was like, let's do that in a drama. Let's try to do that in a drama. So yeah, I don't even know what your question was, but I answered like
You answered it. It's
I answered
great.
like 40 questions then.
Well, I wanted to say the first emotional response that I had in the movie relates to my own personal experience as a veteran.
Okay.
And so it was the moment when she says to collect the dog tags.
Yeah.
And I like had a moment where I felt like that lump in my throat because of course, and it's such a nuanced part of the film, but there's the point where she's the outsider.
Yeah.
And then she does that act of duty. Yeah. And then she becomes a ranger in the end. So my thought was, what research or preparation, if any, did you do to convey that camaraderie that exists within the military?
So, I mean, I didn't have to do a lot of research in all honesty, but mostly because a lot of my other movies, I'd already done the research. So like Rampage has a big military component. I had a colonel. I worked with the military in getting like everything, like from the maps down correctly. Like, you know, like my approach is, even in the popcorn movie, is I don't want people to see something and just go, well, that's just ridiculous. So for example, like with Joe Manganiello in Rampage, he would never put his finger on the trigger until he went to pull it. And he would, you know, we sent them off and they trained with SEALs and like, you know, special forces operators, and like they would come back with those. So I'd done this, and with San Andreas, it was helicopter pilots. And, you know, I'd done enough of that stuff where I was like, I kind of now know generally the rules. And this one, I didn't have to do a lot of research into that. What my approach to it was Atlas has actually always wanted to be a ranger.
Right.
So I had to then go, okay, well, what's it mean to be a ranger? And so that's where I focused was, so I did this whole breakdown, and it's, you know, a lot of this stuff doesn't end up on screen, but it's like, they're the best of the best, not because of their physical abilities, it's because they're centered, they're balanced. Rangers in those ARC suits are, I always said this to Jen, it's like, and to Sterling too, it's like, they're the most emotionally, socially, physically, and intellectually balanced individuals the military has to offer, because the machine does so much for them. They have to be the human component. So I had to go put myself in that headspace. And then because she wants to be a ranger as a little girl, and we, you know, at the point in the movie where she collects the dog tags, you may not know that yet, but her behavior betrays that. And I really love the storytelling approach where it's like, she's hiding information from us, and Smith's poking and saying, I want to know more, I want to know. And that's the only reason it comes out. As we're like, in like, you know, lamer stories, it's just like, cut to the flashback here because the audience needs it. It's like, no, like it's provoked by Smith. So I get to show a flashback because he's digging it up. So I built the whole military aspect off the fundamental truth of Rangers in this future have to have these attributes. And then I built it off what would draw her to this job, and how do I get to kind of access the military through this character, which is very like my movie centric. So it wasn't so much like a study of the military, but it was a opportunity, I thought, to show why people would want to serve and to pay respect to it.
It was well done. We all loved it.
We did. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Awesome.